My wife's pretty cool. I can put car parts on the table and she doesn't freak out. Anyways, a box of Zerk fittings, and I'll explain why we need that in a minute. Let's get a shot of the part numbers. So it's the same on both sides for a 66 Mustang. I know for sure 65 and 6 use the same upper control arms. I think 67, 8. I think the first gens all do, but you know what? I'm not a Ford guy and I don't know for sure. So just, use the internet to figure that out. Don't take my word for it. But these are the upper control arms. These are the assembled control arms. So here's the thing. You can rebuild your control arms, which will need to be painted, and you're going to need new ball joint, and you're going to need new control shaft, and the components. It comes as a kit. The bushing ends, these preload nuts and stuff, that all comes in a kit. By the time you spend time cleaning this and painting it and buying a ball joint and buying a new shaft for it, you could just buy the new control arm. So I just recommend doing that. If anything is going to wear on the suspension in general, in my experience, it's going to be the upper control arm shafts. These do wear out. So I just bought these assembled. I got these from Summit, I think, because it was going to be the cheapest with shipping. I think Rock Auto had them cheaper, but they charge an arm and a leg for shipping. So it was like, it was going to end up costing $20 more, even though the the control arms were cheaper from Rock Auto. So I didn't go to them. NPD is a little bit expensive too. I've got the flavor for Summit. I've been buying from them for years. I'm in California. They got a warehouse in Sparks, Nevada, and I can get parts fast. If I order them today, if I order them before like 2 o'clock today, I will have them tomorrow on my doorstep. So, they're real awesome. So anyways, fully assembled, 2 of these, both the same, and Zerk fittings. So for whatever reason, I saw it in the picture and then I saw somebody's review on Summit, I think it was. Don't ask me, why did they do this? Why? Why go through the trouble of giving you Zerk fittings if they're straight? If anybody's ever looked at the way one of these control arms, and this is, on any of these strut tower setups, not a strut tower, but control arm tower is set up on a Mustang. It's a very unique thing, and everybody's seen them. This sits inside of that tower, and there's like a half an inch on either side of this thing. You can't get a grease gun in there. It's like, why go through the... So anyways, hopefully I got the right ones. These seem like they're 1/8 inch. Yeah, those look like 1/8 inch to me. So I just, went on Amazon, where they run the entire world, but I can get stuff like faster than anywhere. I just went on and I bought a whole kit for like $16, Chinesium Zerk fittings, but it's a Zerk fitting. It doesn't need to be anything special. Just don't over tighten them when you put them in, because you can snap them off. Don't ask. So anyways, yeah, here they are. I think I got the right size, because this is 1/8 and 1/4. Yeah. 1/8, 27. So let's hope and pray that these are 1/8, 27 right here, and I think that they are. These look like 1/8, 27 to me. Yeah, for sure. So just pick one of these up, or you can buy them individually if you want. You can't beat the price on these, unfortunately. So that way these come out at an angle and you can grease them. Because right now, the way that it is set up stock, I don't even know if it has Zerk fittings, or if they are, I didn't see them. And so I don't know. This stuff is supposed to be serviceable. If you can grease these, they'll last a long time. But what happens is they dry out and the shaft wears into the bushing, and that's it. Then they're junk. And they pop. And I can hear the passenger side one on mine popping. And I put new leaf springs in the back the other day, and it rides awesome in the rear, and now the front feels all soft. So I'm going to rebuild the front. So that's what this is going to be about. We're going to do the upper control arms. I've already done the lowers. I did the lowers when I was doing the disc brakes. I could get in there easily. The springs are a little bit more tricky. Right now, I'm going to pop these in and I'm going to leave the original springs in, but I ordered the Eaton springs. So this is really important, you know. So the Moog springs that are the replacement for this are 8088s, and they are not the right springs. As a matter of fact, CJ even tells you, they tell you you're going to have to cut them. But they're like $66 springs or something like that for the pair. For $200, which is ridiculously expensive, you can buy the original Eaton springs that actually will work in here. I ordered those, but they're not going to be here for a little while. I also want to see what the ride is like with new control arms in it and the original springs, because the ride height looks perfect right now. So, you know, I don't know. Changing the springs is super easy, so I don't mind putting the old springs in and popping the new ones in it. There's literally like no tools involved in doing that, other than you got to take the shock out. So I guess I'm lying, but once you take the shock out, you just compress the spring and pop a new one, and it's not hard. So, anyways, that's just some tech tips there. You know, these are Moogs. Moog makes a lot of shit. I don't know if they've kind of sold out. These are Federal Moogle, so I guess Federal Moogle bought Federal Mogul. You know, I don't know. I've been saying it Federal Moogle. I've said it like that for years, so somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. They make so much stuff. You know, they make the actuators for the ailerons on like Boeing aircraft and stuff like that. So, you know, they're a huge name. They do a lot of stuff, and they generally make really good quality stuff. As a matter of fact, they even make parts that are used on amusement rides, believe it or not. We're going to go ahead and we're going to get these installed. So let's take a gander at what we got here. Spring, shock, spring perch, upper control arm. And this is what I was talking about. I don't see any Zerk fittings on here, period, so those haven't been lubed in 54 years, so I'm sure these control arms are shot. We'll take a look once we get it out of here. So the way that we're going to do this is we're going to take the shock first. We're going to remove it from the top. It'll come out. I've already put shocks in, as you can see. I'm going to get my spring compressor in here, and we're going to compress the spring, and we're going to get the spring out of here. Then we're going to pop the ball joint, which may or may not be difficult. We'll see. And then we're going to take the nuts off. Now, there are shim packs in here. I know I didn't mention this before. It's going to need to be aligned after this. You have to do an alignment after replacing an upper control arm. It's just the way that it is. But put the shims back in the way that they are, because it's going to be close. It'll be drivable to be able to get it over to the alignment shop. But yes, it will need to be aligned. We're also going to be replacing, I've got new poly bushings for these spring perches. I went cheap and I didn't buy new spring perches just because it only needs bushings. So I've got polyurethane bushings to go in here. So we're going to be doing all that. On this side over here, you can see the lock nuts on this side. I shot them with a little bit of penetrating oil just to help them come off. They're going to be tight no matter what because they're supposed to lock. They didn't give me new nuts with it, which is kind of annoying, but as long as they still grab the bolt, and there's new bolts, so they should grab just fine, or studs, actually. They're studs, part of the shaft. As long as they grab onto it pretty decent, you know, they're not loose or anything, they'll be fine. But there is paint and rust and stuff build up on there, and to keep from completely destroying those nuts, you want to make sure you throw a little bit of lube on there. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the first one, because I've never had to do one on this particular vehicle or any Mustang of this era. So I'm going to do this one, and then we'll do the other one together, because I'll be a little bit more in tune with it. I won't be stumbling, and I'll tell you about any mistakes that I made on this side, because I'm sure that I will find out that I should have done something a certain way. So we'll be back. So it's the next day, if you want to clue at how things went yesterday. I fought with the coil spring for a little while. It wasn't horrible, but it was more of a pain than these usually are. Um, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to kind of go over the order of how I did it, some of the mistakes that I made, and what I think that you might want to do when you go to do this. Um, I pulled the shock first. Um, then I believe I separated the ball joint too to get the A-arm as low as possible. And then I went to compress the spring. Now I have two spring compressors. I've got an external one and an internal one. And the internal one is more correct, but it's not the Mustang one that fits in a tighter spot. And I wasn't going to buy a third one, so I made my internal one work, but it was very tight. And I had to use it upside down because it's too long and it'll hit the spring perch if I try and use the nut on the threaded shaft. If I try to use it on the top, you can't fit it. You have to do it from the bottom, or I would have had to cut it, and that wouldn't have worked either because it would have been too short when compressing a new spring. So that was a bitch. The other thing I didn't do that I probably am going to do on this side is remove the guard, the inner tower guard or support. I'm not exactly sure what you'd call that, where the bump stop is. I may take that out, although that wasn't too much of a hindrance. I was still able to get in there pretty decently. And thinking about it now, you might be able to use an external spring compressor on it relatively easily with that removed. So I don't know, maybe I'll take that off. It's not that many bolts, but they're pretty crusty looking. So, I'm sure there's probably Mustang guys that are probably just going to laugh at me, but I never worked on one of these before. So there's probably way better videos on doing this than me, but, I'm just going through how I did it. So once I got the spring out of there, it was a piece of cake. You take the bolts or the nuts off the other side, take your shim packs out and set them off to the side. Don't screw them up because you'll be real close if you just put them back where you got them from. And then it was just as simple as I had to take I took the spring perch off. Like I think I mentioned, I'm reusing my spring perches, just putting poly bushings in them. It was actually a little bit harder to press this out than I thought. I've got a 20-ton shop press, so it's, I'm able to do that. But I still had to heat it, believe it or not. I could not get it to, I heated it and I put penetrating oil on it in order to get the rubber out of there. That's how sticky it was. But, you can just see how shot these are. They were in really bad shape. And then the control arm on the other side was definitely shot. It's clunking. Once I got it out, when it was bolted up, I could grab onto it and move it around, and I could see how bad it was. So we're going to go ahead and we'll do this one kind of step by step as I usually do. I'll do some and I'll video it and talk about it, and so you can get an idea of what some of this looks like. So the first thing we're doing is we're pulling the shock out. Just a tip, if you don't have a bottle jack, get a bottle jack. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight one. I don't put my life under it, but I've had this for years and it's never failed. So it works really well for doing stuff like this. You can use a floor jack, but I think bottle jacks work real well. You need to jack this up a little bit. It makes it a hell of a lot easier to get to the bolts or the nuts on these studs for the shocks. That's just a quick tip. You can also, it pulls it further away so you don't hit the frame rail with an extension trying to get to the one on the back, because there's two. There's one here and there if you've never done these shocks before. And then you take the shock off and then loosen up the nuts on these carriage bolts. These are carriage bolts, and they will probably come loose and fall at some point when you're doing this. So take the 3 nuts off so you can take this out, because you need access to this whole thing in order to get the spring compressor down in here. So I just wanted to cover that real quick. So I don't know how I could have been so incredibly foolish yesterday, but I should have taken this out of here on the other one. People are probably going to laugh at me. I was kind of in a hurry. I had some things going on yesterday, and it was just stupid of me to not take that out of there. It would have made this so much easier. I think I can get my external spring compressor in here. It wasn't that hard to take out, and I just used my electric ratchet. Those are super handy if you don't have one, or an air ratchet. Either way, that just makes the access to this a lot better. I always say, you learn from my mistakes. All right, we get the spring compressor in here. This is my kind of general internal spring compressor. It's an OEM Tools version. It's not the perfect one for this, but it works pretty well. There are better ones. You'll notice when I use this one, I keep the jaws at a 90-degree angle. That'll make it run straight. Don't put them in the same plane. That'll make it want to go sideways. So just make sure you get them on the same plane. Try and get as many coils in between as you can. So like leave one coil on the bottom and one coil on the top like I've got there. That'll give you the most compression, but it'll keep it clear. You won't be able to hook it on there obviously when it's installed like this, but if you go to do the new coil and you compress it here, you're going to figure out real quick that you can't put the spring in. So that's just a real quick thing on that. And this is what I was talking about with the jack screw. So the jack screw, I've got it upside down because it'll hit the spring perch right here if I don't. So I had to put it in upside down. It's going to get really tight here. I'm not going to be able to get my wrench off here in a minute, so I'm going to have to flip it over and just use the open end side. So that's just a real quick thing there. Be careful when you're doing this. I've seen these springs blow before when people either don't compress them right or the spring compressor lets go. It'll knock your teeth out if you're lucky. It could kill you. So just be real careful when you're doing that. Springs out. Way easier than yesterday. Doing it one time makes it so much easier to do it the second time. So without a hitch, compressed real easily. And here's what you're left with. Also, when you get this out of here, clean all the dirt and everything out of here at least. I'm probably going to get some flack because I didn't go through and paint this and re-undercoat it and everything. But you know what? The whole point of this is it's supposed to just be a driver, So the next thing is we're going to get a pickle fork. We're going to loosen up the ball joint. The other side came off really easily, but these ball joints are relatively new. So, sometimes it takes a little bit of heat to get these off of here just so you know. So you take the cotter key out, okay, and then you back the nut all the way off. Get yourself a pickle fork. If you don't know what that is, that's a pickle fork. Get that in there and give it a whack with a BFH. And if you don't know what BFH is, that's a BFH. If you don't know what that means, you'll figure it out. So we're going to do that. We're going to bust that loose, take the two nuts loose, take our shim packs out. That's it. This thing will come right out. And then I'll go through the rebuilding of the spring perch next. So let's review. Got it off. Broke my pickle fork. Ran to Pep Boys. Got another pickle fork, which I'm lucky Pep Boys is only like a 2-minute walk from me. And popped it apart. Got lazy before I went and got the new pickle fork and tried to use my 3-job puller. Yeah, that didn't work. But now the rest is easy. So my 3/4 ton, it wasn't this hard to get the ball joints off. I don't know, that sucker was in there. Anyways, so now this one's not as bad as the other side, but I'm going to try and do it, but I'm trying to do this one-handed. You can hear it clunk. Yeah, it's not going to show up on the video. I can't do it with one hand, but being able to make that clunk with my hand is kind of a big deal because when this is under load and tension, it's going to clunk a lot while you're driving. So anyways, we got it loose. And we're going to back off those nuts and get this thing out of here, and we'll rebuild the spring perch. Okay, so the control arm's out. I've got the spring perch out. Just a note on these. Just make sure you pay attention because the coil stop. Let's see if I can do this. This part right here, the coil stop right there goes towards the back or towards the tower. Jeez, I can't talk today, as usual. So we're going to service this next. A lot of folks just buy brand new ones. I went the cheap route. These are not expensive, but the ones with polyurethane in them, I think I want to say they were like $40 a piece, and I bought all the bushings for it for like $15. Prothane makes bushings for this. So we're going to press one stud out, or one bolt rather. They're knurled, so they just press out. And then we're going to press the shaft out from one side, and we're going to replace them. And I'm going to clean it up a little bit. I probably should paint them, but I'm impatient, and this isn't you know, $1 million build here. So this is the other thing I was talking about. If you're not going to paint this, which I'm not, at a very minimum, get in here and just do a really good job of cleaning this out of here. See how bad that is? The water gets in here and it'll sit in here and it'll holds the moisture and it'll rot this out. I'm fortunate, California car, there's no rust, but you know, this absolutely, you want to get this cleaned out at a minimum. So I'm going to sit here and clean this out, do some dirtier work, and then we'll get on with repairing the perch. So I'm trying to figure out what this new penetrating oil is, what it smells like. It's got a great aroma to it. It's, I don't know, a cross between Windex and, I don't know, cross between Windex and silicone, maybe? Silicone? Not silicone. Like I said, I can't even talk. Anyways, knocker loose. I finally ran out of my my trusted LPS liquid wrench that I had lying around for the last 15 years. So that's my new one. It's got an interesting aroma. Anyways, so I knocked out the bolt. It's a knurled bolt. Here, we got it right here. So just, you know, when you put it back in, make sure you line it back up with the same teeth. When I did the other side, it still bit pretty well. So do that. And I'm just going to press this out. Now we'll see how easily this one comes out. The one yesterday, it did not want to come out. I had to heat it. And it's just rubber. You know, I thought for sure this thing would just pop right out on the other side. Now look at this. This one looks like it might just come right out. Now it's getting tight. Maybe she'll go. It's not a good place for me to stand, by the way. Never stand in line with this. When you're putting pressure, don't stand right here. If that thing kicks out, it's going to hit you right in the face. So, yeah, it's getting tight. And I don't want to bend this spring perch. So I'm already starting to bend it. So I'm probably going to hit this with some heat. And it's going to take a couple hands. And I don't have my tripod handy. So let me hit this with some heat and we'll punch it out and we'll take a look at it. It's really interesting. You would think that these would come out relatively easily, but they just don't. And it, as you press it, it bunches up in there and makes it even worse. So a little heat. It gets down to a certain point. I just used an impact socket just to get on the inside here, because I don't have the proper drifts for this, so I just use what I got laying around. But then it popped right out with some heat. So it softens the rubber up and lets it come out. So we're going to cut this off of here. All I'm going to do, I'm not going to show any of this. I'm just going to clean this up. And then this is a one-piece rubber bushing. Let's go over here and take a look at these are the polyurethane ones, and they just go in from either side. Now, what I had to do on the other one, and you might have to do, if you have trouble getting it in, take a box cutter and chamfer this edge. If you don't, you know, a chamfer is just an angled cut. You know, trim it. Just slice a little angled trim all the way around. Chamfer it. Okay? That'll make it go right in. And then you can either use, I've got some of the suspension urethane grease. You can use that. I think moly grease works fine on urethane too. You could do either one. And so these just press in either end of the perch and then just slide the shaft in there. And the new one goes together pretty easily. I didn't have to press it together or anything. It's a snug fit. That's all it's supposed to be. And you know that you are nothing like a little pad on Sunday. All right, so we got the San Fernando Valley rebuild going on here with the spring perch. Got my Zerks installed. It's more important that you have these at the right angle than you do have them tight. And don't tighten them down and then try and back them off, because then they're not going to be as tight. Just snug them and get them in the right position, because if not, they're going to be pointing the wrong way, and then you're going to try and back them out and they'll be too loose. So just, you know, snug. Don't snap them off. All right, I'm going to bolt this. I'm going to get the nuts, which are over by the car. Remember, the spring perch, the spring stop goes on the car side or on the inside of the fender. You want that over there. Don't flip this around, because you could do that, and then you're going to find out that your spring doesn't fit if you do that. So don't, you know. All right, cool. Let's get this thing back in. All right, so I did lie to you guys a little bit, which shouldn't surprise you. You're used to it by now. When I said I was going to put the original springs back in, I was shocked. I ordered these Eaton springs, which I'll talk about those in a second. I ordered them from NPD on Friday, and UPS delivered them on Saturday, which I thought would be impossible, but they did. The Eaton springs, um, they're really good springs, and I found out why they're so expensive. It's the material that they're made out of. This particular steel is really high quality. It will maintain its properties, unlike the Moog springs that are cheaper. Will wear out faster. So they'll have a stiffer rate at first, and then they'll have a weaker rate as time goes on. So these are, I think, well worth the money. I've heard really good reviews. I did check the diameter of these is slightly larger than the original, so they're going to be stiffer. Yeah, I don't know what it felt like when it was new, because I wasn't even born yet. So these are the Eaton springs. I already have the other side assembled, as I mentioned before. I just forgot to mention that I am putting the new springs in it right away. And then this is one of the polyurethane spring isolators or cushions that go at the top. So this is the bottom of the spring. This is the top where it feathers in. So this goes on top there. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to get my spring compressor here, and we're going to get it all what I'd call bench compressed, even though I'm doing it on the floor. Getting it compressed and ready to go in. And then we'll go ahead and we'll slide it in there. So it's going back in now. Just a little tech tip here. In order to get this back up in the spring perch, because the spring perch is going to fight you. It's going to want to be turning. Take your foot and just put it on the tie rod mount and shove the hole. If you already put the ball joint together, which I did, which was kind of smart and kind of stupid all at the same time. I want it to be able to hold the spring in once the spring was in there, but it's also higher because of that. So to get the spring in, as I was finagling it in, I just stepped on the tie rod end, which brought the suspension down to be able to slip this up in there. So it's in now. We're just going to sit here and we're going to wrench on it. You'll notice kind of how smart this is, or how it worked out. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but the spring stop there, as you crank the wrench this way, the spring stop keeps the spring from turning as you're doing it. So that's kind of nice. So we're just going to wrench on this until it's all the way in. And then we're going to put the shield back in here and the shock, and that's it. That's going to close this one out. So hopefully this is helpful. There's probably other detailed videos on this already, I imagine, but it's good content, and I think people might pick up some of my methods. Maybe they'll learn something. All right. So before we end this, let's take a look at the ride height. This thing looks absolutely perfect. So it's got the Eaton 1240s in the front, MC1240s. They're available at NPD, National Parts Depot. I gotta hand it to everybody. They said go with the Eaton springs, and they were right. I mean, the ride height is just perfect. It settled. It was a little high. I drove it around the neighborhood, we've got some speed bumps around and stuff, and it totally settled in. So the Eaton MC1240s in the front, they're good with air conditioning or without. I think they're even good up to the 289s, two-barrel 289s. In the rear, we've got the 85 pounds per inch. They're the light duty, or what came on the vehicle from the factory, leaf springs. There are 4 leafs in the rear, just whatever came from the factory. And that gives you a perfect ride height. So we'll go ahead and end this one here, and next week we're going to be doing the Hyperspark install, so make sure you stay tuned for that.